Hi everyone, I'm going to step you through a word mapping exercise now. This is one that we've taken from the workshop, so it's the PGSM. It's one of those 15-minute routines that you can sprinkle throughout the week. It builds spelling and vocabulary through that orthographic mapping process. So P stands for phoneme, G-grapheme, syllable type and morphology. I'm going to give 3 examples today. We'll do astronaut like we did in our workshop. And then I'll do a JP example and a middle primary, upper primary example. So the very first thing about this exercise is that we don't want students to see the word written first. What we want them to do, so I'm adding a little S in here, is we want to say the word out loud and we want the students to repeat it. So the word is astronaut and the students would repeat that, astronaut. What we're doing is engaging that phonological loop and putting it into their short-term memory, and through this process and then repeating it throughout the week, we hope to move that into their long-term memory. So we say it out first. So I'm adding that little S. There we go, say it. Then we go down to those phonemes. So that's when we break apart the word into its individual sounds that make up the word. So astronaut would be A-S-T-R-O-N-O-T. That's our phonemes. And we count out those phonemes, tap them out. Some students might like to put a dash when they're hearing that phoneme. Then we go to our graphemes. The graphemes is the first time that the students are going to see this word written down. If this is an introduction session, the teacher writes it up and models this part of the lesson so that they're getting the correct spelling from the very start. If it's a repetition of the exercise later in the week, or it's in that periodic review process, students can write down the word, of course, but you want to be checking that it is the correct spelling used and correcting that straight away if not. So back to this grapheme, astronaut, sounding it out as we go along, and then recording in the Elkin sound boxes. So it would be A-S-T-R-O-N-O-T. Like I said, when the teacher's modelling, we're showing that it's a vowel digraph spelling of that or sound. We want it imprinted, the correct spelling first. Graphemes. Then we go through to our syllables. Astronaut, so we want kind of that kinesthetic movement, tapping it out with older students. One of those hooks that when they don't need it anymore, you can get rid of. But it is part of breaking that word into other chunks. Astronaut. If you've worked with syllables and you know the 6 or 7 different syllable types, we would then go into that. As is a closed syllable, tro is an open syllable, the vowel sounds long. In this closed syllable, our vowel sounds short, and this one is a vowel T. If you haven't done work on the syllable types, don't worry about that now. The process of breaking it into syllables is still quite important. When students know about syllables, if they've heard a word before, the syllable types, knowing the syllable types can help them with the spelling. If it's an unknown word, knowing about the syllable types can give them options for trying to sound out that word. Okay, so here's our syllables. Now we're down to the morphology. So when we're going into the morphology, we're looking into those layers of the English language. So our French, our Greek, and our Latin layers. So this word has 2 units of meaning. So morphology being the smallest units of meaning in that word. So the 2 units there are astro and naught. At this part of the lesson, this is when you draw upon that prior knowledge of what the kids might know. So you can have discussions around what they think that is, what they know about that content, that subject area, and bringing that into the conversation. Lots of students may have heard of these terms before, but they're not able to give a precise definition of it. So this is when the teacher can present that information to them. knowing about morphemes and how words are built together is really, really important for building up this vocabulary. So if vocabulary is a focus for you, then giving the students all the things they need to know about the word helps build up that vocabulary, particularly around subject content knowledge. So back to here, our astro and our naught. So astro, we've had that rich conversation. Now we bring it into, so astro, yes, it means pertaining to the stars, a celestial body. And it comes from our Greek derived language. Naught also comes from our Greek language, meaning traveller and sailor. So then we can have, the Russians have a cosmonaut, astronaut, a space sailor. Yes, they're the things that we can bring together in this word. It's also really, really good to help anchor that information by providing some kind of visual. Okay, so there is our run through of astronaut. Now let's go to the new word, a JP example for now. So our word is catnap. So it's a compound word, but once again, we want to say the word out loud. Catnap, students repeat it, catnap, check for that articulation, and then break it apart into the phonemes. K, at, n, ap, catnap. Okay, so we've heard it, we've practiced. We can have a conversation around what it means. So a catnap, you can provide those visuals for the JPs right at the start as well. So catnap, what's happening here? It's a cat, it's having a sleep. It's in the sunshine. Okay, so a catnap is having a short sleep during the daytime. So we've talked about that word, we've had a discussion about that word, we've broken it into our phonemes, and now k, at, n, ap. Now we want to place it into our sound boxes. Sorry, I changed sides again. K, at, n, ap, catnap. Then we want to break it into our syllables. Cat, nap. And we can talk about, it's a closed syllable and a closed syllable. Our vowel sound is short and it's trapped in by a consonant. We can also talk about that being a compound word being brought together. And that's the morphology of this word as well. So we can break apart cat, we can break apart into nap, the two smallest units of meaning in that word. With our JP classes, if the word lends it to, of course we talk about the Greek or French or Latin roots there, but in this one we can also do kind of like a word building exercise where we can have nap in the middle and we can branch out to sleep, other words for nap, kip, taking a short kip. So all of those word building exercises can fit in there for a JP. Okay, let's go on to a primary example here. So a word going around at the moment, hearing a lot, infection. So infection, I would say it, students repeat it. Infection, we break it into its phonemes. Infection. Now we teach shin as one unit of sound here. And then, of course, we put it into our grapheme boxes. Sorry, I'll make sure I've got enough here. Shon. Also here, we can start to look at those prefixes and suffixes. So in this word, I would then ask the students to box the prefix that they can see in a different colour. When we come down to the morphology, I'll tell you why I haven't boxed the in here. In, of course, can be a chameleon prefix, so it can be an in or an im, meaning not or in, depending on what consonant is following that prefix. When we break this word into its syllables, there's three: infection. And then we start looking at that morphology of the word. So when we start looking to the morphology of this word, we may be tempted to put in as a standalone prefix and then the base word being something around feck, and the suffix then being shon. But this is where it's important where the teacher does that little bit of research beforehand. Now, shon is probably a familiar suffix that the students have been working with quite a lot. If you're using something like a Jolly grammar program, they're probably being introduced to the shon around year 3 or 4, I would say. So shon is one of those suffixes which changes the verb into a noun of classification or a noun of action. When we know about the morphology of this word, we can then explain to our students that it comes from a Latin word meaning, in Latin, in facere. That's my very best Latin. I don't know if I have it right. But in facere means to dip in or taint. So we can start to have those discussions around what does it mean to dip something in if you're infected or be tainted if you're infected. So here the morpheme is actually something like the infth relating to this Greek, well, it's actually from Old English and Latin. And then that shon is our other morpheme, changing that from the verb form into the noun of action or condition. Now, there's one little part missing off here, and that's the etymology. When we're talking about etymology, which is the history and the origin of some words, of words, they might not fit into this framework, especially if it's an irregular word. So the example on the handout that I've given you today is love. Now love, obviously when we're looking at the phonemes, is l, a, v. And then when we're mapping it on here, students will notice that it hasn't got that regular phoneme-grapheme correspondences. So it really is important with an irregular word to look at this etymology. So the word love actually in Old English was first written laffa. I'm not sure, I don't know Old English pronunciation. But you can see here that over time, the spelling of that changed. And there's actually a whole group of words, love, shove. There's a group of words that fit around this etymology and this rule. So when students know about the history and the origins of words, they can scaffold and build up an understanding of that word. So if you're interested, I have some handouts that I can email to you. So on the handouts is just a quick summary of those 6 steps and a practice sheet that you can run through. If you're doing this in your online teaching, in your live streaming parts, you would say the word and the students would repeat it. But if they're doing it just as a practice, of course, you'd start from step 2 and only use step 6 when you need it. Okay, thanks guys.